Five Nights at Freddy's is finally making its way into the fog, and the community couldn't be happier. Announcing the chapter nearly an entire year in advance was a bold choice, but one that's paid off as the hype has been slowly building ever since. Now that it's officially the next chapter over the horizon, I wanted to talk about 3 things which could make or break both the FNAF chapter and potentially the game of DBD as a whole. It's important for the game's health to keep a large chunk of the new players who arrive with this chapter, and doing that means diving deep into FNAF's expansive lore to find what makes it special, so those new players have something familiar they can cling to as they explore deeper into the fog. So let's get into what I believe to be the single most important aspect for the Five Nights at Freddy's chapter's success. A killer power being tied thematically into the franchise every step of the way. I'm going to pitch you a killer power concept I came up with, then we'll break it down to better illustrate exactly what I mean when I say tied into the franchise thematically. New killer, the attraction. Springtrap is the clear and obvious choice to be the killer for this chapter, and he hasn't come alone. Spawning into the trial alongside Springtrap are the 4 animatronics Freddy, Foxy, Chica, and Bonnie, which search around their section of the trial scanning for survivors at 3 meters per second and can temporarily be deactivated with the use of a new special item. Also spawning around the map are 4 special chests containing Faz wrenches, which break upon use but have no limit to how many can exist in the trial, similar to Vecna's treasure chests resetting after a short time. Springtrap, as the player-controlled killer, commands the animatronics from the shadows, being able to swap into their view at any moment and gaining undetectable for a short time whenever an animatronic is deactivated. Springtrap himself is a standard 4.4 meters per second killer with a 32 meter tear radius. The animatronics will stay within their assigned regions, patrolling along their search paths while scanning for survivors, similar to Skull Merchant scan lines. They don't have a typical tear radius, but instead make loud mechanical footsteps wherever they go. Once a survivor has been spotted, the animatronic will pursue at 4.4 meters per second for 30 seconds or until deactivated. They are also alerted to nearby loud noises. Once grabbed, survivors are dragged towards the nearest spring lock mechanism. They can either free themselves with the use of a Faz wrench, or will break free after filling the struggle bar, similar to propelling crows. If you break free, the animatronic will become deactivated temporarily. Spring lock mechanisms are an alternate hooking method, similar to Pyramid Head's cages, and are meant to bypass typical hook and unhook mechanics. 4 spawn around the map evenly spaced apart, and they can be sabotaged like regular hooks to snap shut and become unavailable for a certain amount of time. Springtrap can see the auras of spring-lock mechanisms, meaning he can also use them if he's close enough to one. Springtrap as the killer would also have 3 cameras he can place to swap between alongside the animatronic POVs. They are placed and destroyed exactly like Singularity's pods, except Springtrap places them manually, meaning he can only place them within his reach. You can guide the animatronics to certain places off the path with the help of the cameras, as you're both able to see and manipulate the search path while looking through them. Springtrap can also summon the nearest animatronic to assist in a chase, which has a medium cooldown overall and a longer cooldown specific to each animatronic, similar to Vecna's spells. Finally, Springtrap has a special attack called Jump Scare. Lunge forward a short distance to deal damage, similar to Dracula's dog lunge. However, if you perform the jump scare while you are undetectable as a result of your power, the distance you cover is significantly increased, making it more similar to Demogorgon's lunge. That's the power, which personally I'm very happy with. It's my first ever stab at designing a power, so let me know what you think in the comments down below. Also, special shout out to Twins Main Sage and O Tofu for their input and help with balancing. W creators, you should check both of them out. Now, let's walk through my creative process while creating this concept and how it relates to the idea of being thematically consistent. I really love the idea of the 4 animatronics wandering around the map, as that's really where FNAF began. Being able to hear their heavy robotic footsteps approaching instead of a typical terror radius, and having to stay hidden from their sight as they roam looking for you sounds like it was ripped straight from the games, and is exactly the type of gameplay loop you would expect from a Five Nights at Freddy's chapter in Dead by Daylight. Having the cameras gives you other ways to track your victims, and also allows you to guide the animatronics to specific locations. In the early games, you're constantly flipping through cameras trying to identify threats, and that's what I wanted to emulate with these 7 available POVs Springtrap has access to. FNAF is all about jump scares, so not having some form of undetectable felt like a missed opportunity. The animatronics giving Springtrap undetectable whenever they're deactivated allows him to sneak up on unsuspecting survivors and jump on them before they even know what's happening. Faz wrenches are ripped straight from the newer FNAF titles, as they're an item used to progress through the game. In Security Breach Ruin, we see the Faz wrench used to deactivate Roxy, which is where the inspiration came from. Finally, spring lock mechanisms were first introduced in Sister Location, but their existence within the lore suggests that they've been around since before the beginning. Ever since FNAF 1, animatronics have been stuffing our corpses into empty suits. Then in newer games and in the movie, we see numerous examples of spring lock suits. These were designed to house both metal endoskeletons and be usable as wearable mascot costumes. The spring-lock name comes from the metal springs locking onto the endoskeleton, keeping the costume attached securely to the animatronic. Then, once the endoskeletons are removed, the metal springs can be pushed back to make room for a human puppeteer. That's summarizing it pretty briefly, as getting into the dirty deep details would have this video being multiple hours long. It should be clear by now that every decision I made when designing this was made with the source material in mind, and there was a constant conscious effort to keep it faithful. The overall strength of the killer should be A tier. I believe this to be the ideal benchmark of strength, where killer powers are strong enough to dictate chases without being so strong that you leave the survivor feeling helpless. Compare this to low tier killers like Trapper, whose power can be disarmed and largely ignored. His counterplay is literally having someone follow him around and disarming his traps. I love Trapper, but he is bad for a reason. I use Trapper as an example here though, because Springtrap would actually play more similar to a trap killer, creating dead zones with his power and ending chases quickly. Because his anti-leap was quite strong, he has to lack mobility to compensate, so having the animatronics feel like actual threats would give us a more balanced killer overall. With a killer worthy of representing the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise, it's time we move on to the second most important quality that the chapter needs to have to hit home with FNAF enthusiasts: cleverly integrated lore. If Behavior wants to keep all the FNAF fans in the fog, it's important that the franchise, which was built entirely off of its hidden secrets and disturbing subject matter, come to the fog feeling like a natural continuation to the stories of whichever characters and locations release along with it. A great example of this is the Lich's lore from Dungeons & Dragons. He is a gifted spellcaster who seeks to learn all there is to achieve his goal of obtaining power and control. That's his lore as outlined in his description, which itself remains consistent with his various depictions throughout the D&D universe. But everything from this point on was expertly crafted to feel natural and accurate to the character, while still having him serve as the killer for the entity. When he stumbles upon an ancient dark spell in a language he's never seen, it intrigues him. He spends months trying everything he can to decipher it, and eventually, upon realizing a mistranslation, is able to cast the spell, which summons the entity to claim him. But instead of being taken, he's able to hold the entity off at bay with ease. His curiosity leads him to go willingly, knowing that whatever this dark and mysterious power is, would one day be his to command. His story within the world of Dead by Daylight feels perfectly in line with his character's motivations. Compare this to the lore of the Dark Lord, who died in his source material and was changed to have been taken by the entity instead. Even if you only counted the words in both of their biographies, it would be glaringly obvious how much more depth Vecna has over Dracula, which brings me back to my point. There needs to be secrets to uncover, and I personally have lots of faith this is something Behavior knows. Scott Cawthon has been notorious over the past 10 years for being protective of his IP. He knows the reason behind his game's success is the secret stories hidden in the details, along with the few confirmed facts allowing everyone to speculate over everything. If the Five Nights at Freddy's chapter comes to the fog with lore more similar to Dracula's than Vecna's, it will hurt the chapter significantly. With a lore-accurate adaptation fans can appreciate, now we can talk about the final aspect Behavior can nail to hammer home the Five Nights at Freddy's chapter: FNAF-themed Rift. While the Castlevania chapter could have done a better job adapting from Dracula's expansive lore, one aspect where they made up for that shortcoming was releasing alongside a Castlevania-themed Rift. Unlockable legendary skin at level 1, licensed skins for original characters, as well as charms, banners, and badges all themed around Castlevania. With the Tier 70 unlockable being a legendary outfit for Dracula himself, it was the perfect addition to make the chapter feel much bigger than just another IP coming to the fog. If Behavior wants to repeat that success, a Five Nights at Freddy's themed Rift is a no-brainer. I'm not the most creative person, but ideas that instantly jumped out at me are FNAF-inspired outfits for original characters. Give us a Fright Bearfield skin, or Meg wearing a Foxy mask, or Claudette wearing a cupcake shirt. You get the point. There's so many possibilities within the Five Nights at Freddy's expansive IP that every original survivor could have their own Five Nights at Freddy's inspired outfit. And select killers could do the same thing. Fair warning, these ideas might be a little unrealistic, but it's more so about sparking further creativity. So with that disclaimer out of the way, the thought of Trickster being changed into Nightmare Freddy and throwing his Freddles instead of knives would be cool. Dredge could have a Phantom animatronic skin from Five Nights at Freddy's 3, Unknown could have an Ennard skin, and what if we got our first licensed collaboration within the fog, and Pinhead was reskinned to be the puppet? Instead of solving the lament configuration, now you have to find and wind the music box to keep the marionette from unleashing her merry owns. There's truly limitless potential, and because Scott has been so protective with this IP in the past, we can assume everything from Five Nights at Freddy's lore is on the table for Behavior to use, just so long as it serves to tell the story they want to tell with this character. The Five Nights at Freddy's chapter has the potential to reshape the fog and lead to a better and brighter future for the game we all love. So it's not an understatement to say the perception of this chapter could either make or break Dead by Daylight as a whole. I believe a thematically accurate power, having hidden secrets for gamers to uncover, and releasing lots of skins alongside the chapter are the three most important aspects for keeping Five Nights at Freddy's fans in the fog and will ensure our player base stays strong for years to come. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like. It's the best way to make me make more stuff you'll enjoy. And if you really liked it, consider subscribing. Thanks for watching, and take care out there in the fog.